Cool.
All right.
All right, another double header today. We have another mental model,
All right, moving on.
which is called survivorship bias. Have you heard of this one before?
Like the winners write history?
Well, that's what I wrote. Yeah, winners write history. So the survivorship bias is we reach incorrect conclusions because our data is skewed towards those that survived. All right, so this applies to all kinds of things in data, but literally the winners write history. So whatever we know about the barbarians, the Romans wrote about. And the Romans didn't make the barbarians look like good people. Like everything we know about the barbarians, Julius Caesar wrote in his book. And he writes down conversations that happened between two different barbarian tribes. We still call them barbarians today, barbar, that's what the Romans thought they sounded like. They sounded bar, 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 bar. So they didn't write nice things about these people. And even he might have made those things up. How could he know what barbarian A said to barbarian B?
Exactly.
We don't. So all we have is survivorship bias, which says that these guys were uncultured. And I find that pretty hard to believe, right? And it applies even today where any war that happened, World War II, Germans were such bad people. Well, I'm not sure the Americans were so great either in turning Japanese Americans and putting them in concentration camps. And if the war had gone south for the Americans, who knows what we would have done to Japanese. That's just not nice at all.
Yeah.
So we wrote history, and we made it sound like the Americans were such great people.
So how does this apply to
other things? So again, World War II, an example of survivorship bias, the U.S. military concluded that the wings and the tail needed more armor, based on a thorough analysis of planes that were hit. So here we have a little diagram, and you can see all the places that the planes were hit. And as you can see, obviously, the places you need to reinforce are the places with the red dots where they were hit. Right?
Yeah.
That's not what
that's what I
seems
would
like
think.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing could be further from the truth. Planes that took hits in the cockpit engines and rear fuselage were shot down and were not included in the analysis. So, in fact, the exact opposite of the places they thought needed reinforcement were the ones that did.
So these were planes that were hit but didn't go down.
Yeah, because they can only count the ones that didn't go down.
Right.
They only counted the survivors. The ones that actually got shot down, like you get shot in the cockpit, pilot dies, and you lose cabin pressure. You get shot in the engine, you lose an engine, you're going to go down. Rear fuselage, that's a pretty delicate part of the plane. Mm-hmm. So you lose your plane then too. So the places that actually got shot and survived are the places that are actually not that bad, right?
And the U.S. military actually did reinforce the wings and the tail?
That was the conclusion of the report, and
Okay.
I'm not sure. This is from, I pulled this from Wikipedia. This is an image from Wikipedia that I've just drawn out. Yeah?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. All right, cool. So, ignoring survivorship bias, all cryptocurrencies go up in value substantially. Bitcoin up by something like 100,000x over 7 years. Ethereum up 400x over something like 2 years. Litecoin up 1,000x, even more than that now, because I drew this yesterday. So, based on that, it seems like, well, why not just invest in all cryptocurrencies right when they're launched, right? Mm-hmm. Just whenever a cryptocurrency is launched, just invest. Because they're all going to go up. Maybe they might not all go up the same amount, but, right?
I have a funny feeling there's like a coin graveyard.
Yeah. Well, there's been thousands of coins that have been launched. In fact, we don't even know how many were. And all we can count are the ones that survived. All the ones that we see are the ones that survived, but most of them didn't survive, so it's hard to even count them. So here's what would have happened to an index fund of the top 20 cryptocurrencies capped at 25% representation in an index fund. You know what an index fund is?
No.
So it's usually used for stocks where you group a whole bunch of stocks together, and instead of buying 1, 2, or 3 stocks, you buy this group of all these stocks in one bucket. So some go up and some go down at different times, but overall it does pretty well. And this index funds became very popular recently because they actually have a higher return than professionally managed funds, which cost a lot more money. So there was a bet between, I think it was between two investors. I think it was Warren Buffett and someone else, and he bet anyone out there that that an index fund would return more over 10 years than the professionally managed fund, and they bet $1 million, which went to charity, because if they just publicly did this and it went to themselves, it'd look bad. But it went to charity, and I think that it's over now, and Warren Buffett won, or he was about to win when those happened. So index funds are really popular for stocks right now. It's a great way to manage stocks.
What's
Is it a
that?
great way to manage cryptocurrency, though?
What is it capped at 25% representation?
So you don't want one stock to, just because, let's say General Electric, their stock is more valuable, or Facebook stock is more valuable. You don't want them to be too large a percentage of your index fund, or it loses the value of having an index fund. Because you don't have representation. Let's say one stock is 90% of the value of all stocks in that fund. If that stock goes down, then you're kind of screwed. Does that make sense?
So of the top 20 currencies, there's none of them are at a quarter.
Yeah, well, all of them are less than a quarter. Because in this case, Bitcoin is more than 25% of the market market capitalization.
Okay.
Yeah. So we cap Bitcoin at being only 25%. So if you look at this as a graph from woobull.com, I recommend checking it out. Very interesting graphs he's put together. Just before 2014 to 2017, Bitcoin gains 360%. An index of the top 20 cryptocurrencies loses 18%. Plus fees, whatever the index would have. So usually index funds charge like 2%. So just to add salt to the wound, another 2%. So you would actually have lost 20%. So nowadays there's lots of people touting their new index fund of cryptocurrencies, but it might not be such a great idea.
Wow, so that really shows how many currencies went under.
Yeah, this is just the top 20. This is not even counting the other 980 or 1,000 or whatever cryptocurrencies. Wow. So if you bought all of them, you would be worse off.
Wow.
Yeah. Of course, this really depends on when you bought, because if you bought in 2014 January instead of just before 2014, you would have kind of broke even on Bitcoin and lost on the index fund like a whole lot, like you bought here, let's say, right?
Yep.
But let's say you'd bought here, it wouldn't have been so bad.
Yeah.
Or if we continued this into 2018, probably the index fund would have made money because Ethereum and Litecoin are doing so well right now. So it really depends on when you buy. So a lot of index funds will say, if you invest in an index fund a year ago, you would have made this much, therefore invest now. And they pick a place and time that's convenient for them that makes their index fund look good.
Yep. It's all about context.
Sure, yeah. Yeah. So index funds are great for stocks, but cryptocurrencies are not a stock. And I think people get confused about that. And they're not a normal currency either, like investing in euros, which are fairly stable over time. Cryptocurrencies are more like startup companies. They're not the same as startup companies, but they're better modeled, more similar to startup companies. So we will have a mental model coming up pretty soon on power laws, because power laws are what dictate startups, the success of startups and the success of cryptocurrencies. So power laws will be coming out soon.
So the general takeaway from this is be careful how you diversify if you do choose to invest in Bitcoin or alt currencies. There's no guarantee, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's only survivorship bias. There's only what we can see. The hindsight is 2020.
Hindsight, yeah.
And it's very difficult to make future predictions based on
the past.
On the past.
Exactly. Survivorship bias is the exact opposite of hindsight is 2020. I think everyone's familiar with that idea. Hindsight is 2020. Yeah, you look back and you're like, yeah, if I'd known then what I know now, I would have got, an accounting degree instead of whatever, right? I would have never dated that guy, right? Survivorship bias is the exact opposite. It means that our information in the future will be worse than it is in the present. Is that mind-blowing or what?
How will you explain that?
Yeah, so in hindsight's 2020, you know what happened in the past and you would have done things differently then.
Yeah.
With survivorship bias, you don't even have the data from the past to make projections about the future, and any projections you make will be
right.
biased
Yeah.
by the data you have.
Right.
So taking an airplane, you only looking at airplanes that survived will be looking at the wrong airplanes, and you can't even look at the right airplanes because they're down. You know, they're somewhere down in like Germany or wherever. Yeah.
So do we ignore all that?
Ignore all what?
Do we have to try to ignore that bias? How do
Don't
we
ignore the bias. You want to know that the bias is there.
be aware? I mean, be aware of it, but how do we make decisions from it, knowing that it's there?
I think, yeah. Well, what would you do now? You're aware of survivorship bias. Let me kick it back to you.
It's tough. I mean, I think it's. I don't know. I mean, not taking all the ICOs, the initial coin offerings of any currency that pops up. Really, I don't see how it can help you make a decision now.
Now you're just more confused.
Yeah.
Now you're just more confused. Good. All right. So we're going to look at power laws next, and I think that will clear up the confusion.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Looking at the success of current coins is what is misleading. That's what survivorship bias says. If you're trying to invest now based on the success of current coins, that's very misleading.
Ignore those.
Ignore those. Think about the power law coming up next.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Good job, Greta.
High five.
You're a great student.